The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering just enough to make me question my sanity. By 3 a.m., the Hollow Pines warehouse felt like a tomb, and I was the only soul left to guard it. I'd been working the graveyard shift at Hollow Pines Logistics for 6 months. It was a sprawling, half-abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, surrounded by skeletal trees and a chain-link fence that rattled in the wind. The job was simple: monitor the security cameras, log deliveries, and walk the aisles every 2 hours. Easy money, they said. But nobody mentioned the way the air grew heavy after midnight, thick with the smell of damp concrete and something metallic like old blood. The warehouse was a maze of towering shelves stacked with crates that hadn't been touched in years. Dust coated everything, undisturbed except for my footprints. At night the place came alive with sounds, creaks from the rafters, distant thumps like something heavy falling, and a faint rhythmic tapping that seemed to come from nowhere. I told myself it was just the building settling, but my flashlight's beam never felt strong enough to cut through the shadows. My first few weeks, I chalked up the unease to being alone in a cavernous space, but then I started noticing things. The cameras would glitch, showing empty aisles 1 second and a blurry shape the next, gone when I rewound the tape. My logbook entries, simple notes like 2:15 a.m., all clear, would have extra lines in handwriting that wasn't mine. It's still here. I'd find boot prints in the dust, too big to be mine, leading to dead-end corners. One night, the tapping grew louder, closer, like fingernails on metal. I followed it to ISIL 17, where the air felt colder, heavier. My flashlight caught something, a crate slightly ajar, leaking a dark, viscous liquid that smelled like decay. I radioed my supervisor, but the static was so thick it swallowed my voice. Then I heard it. A low, wet chuckle, echoing from the shelves above. I started locking the security office after that, staying glued to the monitors. But the cameras kept showing that same blurry shape, moving closer each night. It wasn't human, not quite. Too tall, too thin, its limbs bending wrong. Last week, I found scratches on the office door, deep gouges that weren't there before. The tapping never stopped, and now it was right outside, patient, waiting. Tonight was my last shift. I'd already told my boss I was done, but I had to finish the week. At 2:47 a.m., the power cut out. The monitors went black, and the emergency lights cast a sickly red glow. The tapping was deafening now, joined by a dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. I grabbed my flashlight and bolted for the exit, my boots pounding against the concrete. The warehouse felt alive, the shadows twisting, the air thick with that metallic stench. I reached the loading dock, but the door was locked from the outside. My keys were gone, slipped from my pocket somewhere in the dark. Behind me, the chuckle came again, closer, wetter, accompanied by the slow scrape of claws on metal. I turned, and my flashlight caught it. A figure at the end of the aisle, its head tilted, its mouth too wide, its eyes hollow. It didn't move. It just watched, and the tapping grew faster, like a heartbeat. I don't know how I got out. I woke up in my truck parked a mile away, my clothes soaked in sweat and something darker. My flashlight was gone, but my logbook was on the passenger seat, open to a new page. In that same unfamiliar handwriting it read, "You left. It didn't." I haven't gone back to Hollow Pines, but every night I hear it, faint, rhythmic tapping, coming from the walls of my apartment. If this story sent a chill down your spine, hit that like button and subscribe to Dark Veil for more nightmares. Drop a comment. Have you ever worked a night shift that felt wrong? The neon sign flickered, open 24/7, but at 4 a.m. the diner at mile 93 looked like it had been abandoned for decades. I should have kept driving, but my stomach growled louder than my guts warning. I was a long-haul trucker, used to empty highways and lonely nights. The diner at mile 93 wasn't on any map, but it appeared when I needed it most, low on gas, starving, and half asleep on a stretch of road that felt endless. Its windows glowed faintly, the air heavy with the scent of grease and something sour, like milk gone bad. Inside, the place was frozen in time, checkered floors, cracked vinyl booths, a jukebox that hummed without playing. The only sound was the buzz of a dying fluorescent bulb. The waitress, her name tag read Doris, moved like she was underwater, her eyes glassy, her smile too tight. She poured coffee that smelled like burnt rubber and slid a menu across the counter, its pages brittle and stained. I ordered a burger, keeping my voice low, as if speaking too loud might wake something. The kitchen hissed and clattered, but I never saw a cook. Every few minutes, the jukebox would stutter, spitting out a few warped notes of a song I didn't recognize. The air grew colder, the shadows in the corners thicker. I noticed the windows didn't reflect the diner's interior. They showed only darkness, like the world outside had vanished. Doris kept refilling my coffee, even when I hadn't touched it, her hands trembling slightly. "You're lucky to find us," she said once, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't ask what she meant. Then I saw the photos on the wall, grainy Polaroids of truckers, families, lone travelers. Their faces were blurred, their eyes scratched out. One photo, tucked behind the counter, showed a man who looked like me down to the flannel shirt I was wearing. My stomach twisted, but I told myself it was a coincidence. The burger arrived, cold and gray, with a faint metallic aftertaste. I pushed it away, and Doris's smile faltered. At 4:30 a.m., the jukebox screeched, a distorted wail that made my teeth ache. The lights flickered, and the diner shook, like something massive had slammed into it. Doris froze, her head snapping toward the windows. "They're here," she hissed, her voice no longer human. The shadows in the corners moved, stretching into shapes that weren't shapes, long, thin, with too many limbs. I bolted for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The air was thick, suffocating, filled with a low, guttural hum. Doris was behind me now, her breath hot and rancid on my neck. "You can't leave," she said, her voice splitting into a chorus of whispers. The Polaroids on the wall were changing. My face was in them now, my eyes scratched out. The shadows closed in, their touch like ice, and the last thing I saw was Doris's smile, wider than her face should allow. I woke up in my truck, parked at a gas station 200 miles away, my tank full, my clothes reeking of burnt coffee. The diner was gone from my GPS, like it never existed. But my wallet had a new Polaroid inside, me, standing in that diner, my eyes already scratched out. Every night since I hear it, the jukebox's warped tune humming from the shadows of my cab. Did this tale make your skin crawl? Smash that like button and subscribe to Dark Veil for more horrors. Comment below. Ever stopped at a roadside diner that felt off? The radio tower's red light blinked like a heartbeat against the night sky. At 2 a.m., alone in the control shack, I realized that heartbeat wasn't the only thing listening. I took the night shift at the KX-47 radio tower because it paid double and promised solitude. Perched on a hill in the middle of nowhere, the tower broadcasted AM signals to a handful of insomniacs and truckers. My job was to monitor the equipment, log signal strength, and keep the generator running. The shack was a concrete box, its walls stained with mildew, the air thick with the tang of ozone and rust. Outside, the tower loomed, its metal lattice creaking in the wind, its beacon casting long, blood-red shadows. The first few nights were uneventful, just the hum of machinery and the occasional coyote howl. But the silence had a weight, like the air was holding its breath. The radio would pick up static, even when it was off, spitting out faint whispers, words I couldn't quite catch, like a conversation just out of reach. I'd check the logs, but the signal strength was always steady, no interference. Then the footprints started. They appeared in the dust around the tower, barefoot, too small to be mine, circling the base. I'd sweep them away, but they'd be back by morning, deeper, like whoever made them was pressing harder. One night, I found a handprint on the shack's window, smudged and gray, its fingers too long. The glass was cold, even though the desert night was warm. The whispers grew clearer over time, forming phrases, "Stay here, it sees you." I stopped using the radio headphones, but the voices came through the speakers anyway, low and urgent. The beacon's red light started pulsing irregularly, faster when I was outside, slower when I locked the door. I told my boss, but he laughed it off, said I was hearing things, said the desert plays tricks. Last night, I saw something in the monitor's grainy feed, a shape, hunched and still, at the edge of the tower's base. It didn't move, but its head was tilted, like it was listening. The whispers were louder now, overlapping, a chorus of voices that made my skin prickle. I turned off the monitor, but the static followed me, buzzing in my skull. At 3:15 a.m., the generator sputtered, and the shack went dark. The beacon stopped blinking, plunging the hill into blackness. The whispers became a scream, a single word repeated, "Look." I grabbed my flashlight, its beam shaking in my hand, and stepped outside. The air was heavy, smelling of burnt wire and something sweet like rotting fruit. The footprints were everywhere now, a chaotic spiral around the tower. At the base I saw it, the shape from the monitor, closer now, its body wrong, like it was made of shadows stitched together. Its face was featureless, but I felt its gaze, heavy and hungry. The tower groaned, metal bending under some invisible weight, and the ground vibrated with a low rhythmic thrum. I ran back to the shack, locking the door, but the screams followed louder, inside the walls. The sun rose and the shack was quiet again. The generator was running, the beacon blinking steadily. The footprints were gone, the monitor clear. But the logs I'd written were erased, replaced with a single entry in jagged handwriting. "You're part of the signal now." I quit that morning, but the whispers haven't stopped. They're in my car radio, my TV, my phone, always the same voice, saying my name, telling me to come back. If this story left you uneasy, give it a like and subscribe to Dark Veil for more terrors. Comment below. Have you ever felt like something was watching you from the dark? The hospital's third floor was always quiet after midnight, but the silence felt wrong, like it was waiting for something to break it. Mopping those endless hallways, I never expected to find what was hiding in room 317. I'd been a janitor at St. Agnes Medical Center for 3 years, working the graveyard shift to pay the bills. The hospital was old, its walls yellowed, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic and something fainter, like mildew that never quite went away. My routine was simple: mop the floors, empty the trash, and avoid the nurses' glares. The third floor, though, was different. It was the long-term care ward, where patients lingered in comas or worse, their rooms lit only by the hum of machines. At night, the ward felt abandoned. The lights flickered, casting shadows that moved when you weren't looking. The only sounds were the distant beep of monitors, the creak of my cart's wheels, and occasional whispers of wind through the cracked vents. I told myself it was just the building, but my skin prickled every time I stepped off the elevator. The nurses stayed at their station, their eyes glued to screens, never joining me on my rounds. A month ago, I started noticing things. My mop would leave streaks of red, even after I'd cleaned the bucket. Trash cans I'd emptied would be full again by the next night, filled with crumpled bandages, stained dark. Once I found a chart outside room 317, its pages blank, except for a single word scrawled in red ink: "Stay." I showed it to the head nurse, but she brushed it off, saying it was a prank. The chart was gone the next day. Room 317 was always locked, its window frosted, the patient's name scratched off the door. I was told it was empty, but I'd hear sounds from inside, faint scratches like nails on wood, or a low rhythmic thump like a heartbeat. I'd shine my flashlight through the window, but the glass was too thick, showing only my reflection, pale and distorted. The air around the door was colder, heavy with a sour, coppery smell that clung to my clothes. One night, I found the door ajar. My cart was at the end of the hall, and the silence was so thick it felt like pressure in my ears. I pushed the door open, my flashlight shaking. The room was dark, the bed empty, but the monitors were on, their screens flickering with static. Something wet glistened on the floor, trailing to the closet. I called out, my voice small, but only the thumping answered, louder now, faster. I backed away, but the door slammed shut behind me, the lock clicking. At 3:22 a.m., the lights went out. My flashlight flickered, its beam barely cutting through the dark. The thumping was everywhere now, vibrating through the walls, joined by a wet, dragging sound like something crawling across the floor. I pounded on the door, shouting for the nurses, but the hall was silent. The air grew thick, suffocating, smelling of blood and decay. My flashlight caught movement. A shape in the corner, too tall, its limbs bent at wrong angles, its head twitching like it was listening. I fumbled for the closet, hoping for another exit, but my hand brushed something cold and slick, like skin. The monitors flared, their static forming a face, mine, but wrong, its eyes black, its mouth open in a silent scream. The shape moved closer, its breath hot and ragged, whispering my name in a voice that wasn't human. I threw myself against the door and it gave way, spilling me into the hall. I ran, my cart overturned, the elevator doors slamming shut behind me, as something scratched at the metal. I quit that night, my hand still shaking as I drove home. The hospital called it a gas leak, said I'd hallucinated. But my keys were gone, replaced in my pocket with a folded bandage, stained red with "Stay" written in my handwriting. I've moved twice since, but every night I hear it, faint scratches, a thumping heartbeat, coming from my closet. Last week, I found a chart under my bed, its pages blank except for my name, written over and over in red. If this story kept you up, hit that like button and subscribe to Dark Veil for more horrors. Drop a comment. Ever worked a night shift where the shadows felt alive?